Russia has a new Rasputin, and Donald Trump almost had a meeting with him because of Jeffrey Epstein. Well, Rasputin, I am the motherfucking machine. I'm the cyborg! If they had this meeting, they probably would have talked about hyperborea and escaping into the polar ice caps. And no, that is not an exaggeration. That is, like, literally what this guy is into. Naistalo vremai ye kai minai niyainai. AKA, the time of petrification has come. Otherwise known as Strasbourgska. I live off of Red Bull and truth. This is Alexander Dugin, and Alexander is the man behind Putin. In fact, they call him Putin's brain. They literally say that he is the brain behind Putin. He is the man even Putin himself fears. And the parallels between him and Rasputin are insane. But before we get into all of the parallels, I'm going to give you a brief background on Alexander.
Chapter 1. Alexander Dugin, the modern-day Rasputin.
Alexander is basically the philosopher you're not supposed to know about. This bearded mystic believes that Russia basically has a divine predestiny that is sort of apocalyptic in nature. And he's basically the person heralding Neo-Eurasianism. Essentially, Russia is its own civilization and should challenge the West as much as possible. He acts exactly like Rasputin, where he's not a part of the government, but he is always in the Kremlin's ear, telling him what he thinks. Very similar to when Trump had Elon in his ear. It makes you wonder if maybe Trump got the idea from there. Maybe. I don't know. Who knows? Now, from here, he wrote a well-known work called The Foundations of Geopolitics, which he called for Russia to build its influence through alliances and conquests. And Dugin thinks that the Eurasia Party that he established is its own unique fourth position. Now, what this means is essentially when fascism came about, it established itself as the third position, the first two being liberalism and communism. While Dugin believes that Eurasianism is the fourth position, and it doesn't really have a name, it's just the fourth position. Now, this theory is extremely interesting because, according to the theory, the subject of politics is not individualism, class struggle, or nation, but rather existence itself. So where you would have liberalism, like what we have in America, that would be focused on individualism, communism, which would focus on class struggle, and you have fascism, which would focus on the nation, Dasein, or existence itself, is what the fourth position is focused on. Now, according to Dugin, his aim is to take all of the good parts of all three of these political ideologies and implement them, while taking the neutral and the bad ones and decimating them entirely. Destroying them, erasing them, he says. In fact, he describes the fourth position as being a cultural phenomenon, a community of language, religious belief, daily life, and the sharing of resources and efforts as an organic entity. I find it interesting he's extremely into the occult, and the actual symbol of Eurasianism is an 8-pointed star, which is the symbol of chaos magic. If you'd like to read more about this, he does have a book on it. I don't know if it's translated into English, but I learned Russian for the intro of this video, so maybe you could learn it to read Dugin's fourth political thing. And speaking of the occult, this gets us into how he is similar to Rasputin.
Chapter 2. A brief history of Rasputin, baby.
Now, Rasputin is one of my favorite historical figures, and eventually I do plan on doing a full, massive breakdown on him, but these have been done and probably better than I can do, I'm just going to give you a brief overview for this video. Rasputin was essentially a Siberian peasant mystic who rose from obscurity into becoming one of the most infamous spiritual advisors in all of human history. Having never been formally educated, Rasputin just wandered the Siberian wilderness, praying and fasting as a Christian mystic who would just see the Virgin Mary occasionally, and he completely became super famous doing this. He became like renowned throughout Russia. And from here, this is when he founded Klisti. Now, Klisti is a very interesting form of Christianity, and it's very, very dangerous. It will put you in the orb if you're not careful. He basically had this idea that the more you sinned, the better. And not because being a bad boy would get you closer to God. No, no, no. Basically, the more you sinned and the more severe the sin was, the harder you had to repent. And the harder you repented, the closer it made you with the Holy Spirit. This led him to having giant orgies with tons of people who would then grovel on the ground, crying and repenting for their sexual nature and their sins. This led to things like women becoming obsessed with him to such an extent that they would walk around areas holding his penis as if it was a leash, claiming that he was a holy man of God, if not God himself. And as if that's not enough, this led to someone keeping his preserved penis in a jar, worshipping it as a holy relic, claiming it had supernatural powers, worshipping it in a reliquary, and eventually she spiraled into madness while clutching it, claiming it had spiritual energy beyond this world. She would also apparently whisper to it and speak to it. I can't even get women to DM me. And this man has people holding his preserved penis in a jar, worshipping it like it's a holy relic. Anyways, penis reliquaries aside, Rasputin was the only person who was able to somehow heal the holy child that was a descendant of Tsar Nicholas himself. Alexei had hemophilia, and essentially that does not mean that's not a sexuality. That it means that his blood does not clot. And to ease his bleeding, Rasputin would hold his hands in presence and prayer and would basically make the bleeding stop somehow magically. And the royal family was convinced that he could heal him, and he was the only one who could heal him, apparently. And because of this, he became a trusted advisor to the Tsarina, who believed he was sent by God. And because of this, he gained political influence, and he also recommended ministers, shaped wartime policies, and became a massive lightning rod for scandal, if you can't imagine why. Now, as things continued to get insane during World War I, rumors exploded. Rumors of orgies, drunkenness, occult rituals, hypnotism, sexual manipulation, and him having complete hypnotic control over the monarchy exploded. So they had to do something about it. They had to kill him. According to legend, he just was completely unkillable. Led by Prince Felix Yusufov to assassinate him, they poisoned him, shot him, beat him, threw him into an icy river, and despite all of this, he survived. And he refused to die, basically. And eventually he did die. And from there, the monarchy then fell and turned into Bolshevik-controlled Russia. Now, interestingly enough, Russia then turned into the Soviet Union, communism rose, and it allowed for basically the dissolution of Soviet Union to lead to someone like Alexander rising again. As I've talked about in previous videos, the Kremlin coming to power is basically because of a vacuum that was left, which allowed for a hyper-nationalistic borderline monarchy to spawn out of the instability that communism caused. And just like that, we're back in a situation where we have someone like Rasputin being called Putin's brain. So, history might not repeat itself, but it definitely rhymes. And in this case, it rhymes with Dugin and how he is essentially the Neo-Rasputin.
Chapter 3, Dugin's Philosophy and Esoteric Origins.
По-любому меня зовут Стас Борецкий.
Now, Dugin is sanely steeped in occultism, and whereas Rasputin was into Christianity and was a Christian mystic, even though it had that twisted sort of sexual thing going on, it was still Christianity, I guess. Dugin is into the occult, and I mean the occult with a capital O. He is into Hermeticism, Kabbalah, Kabbalion, all of it. In fact, he's a part of something called the Uhinsky Circle. Now, the Uhinsky Circle was started in 1958 and continued after the founder left for the United States through 1974, basically until the 1980s. They founded what is now known as the Soviet Underground Traditionalist Movement, and they basically merged a bunch of traditional ideas with Russian Orthodoxy, Slavic mysticism, and what is Uranianism. This led to an entire culture of secret readings and different initiations within the USSR and within Russia. In fact, they were the first Russians to study Western ritual and Hermetic occultism, Kabbalah, Golden Dawn, Crowley, tarot, chaos magic, and a ton of ceremonial magic, which is interesting because the actual symbol, as I stated earlier, for Uranianism is the chaos magic sigil. Now you have to think, at the time, this stuff was illegal in the USSR, so it was insanely groundbreaking and insanely dangerous. Now this led to something called the radical right-hand path, which is essentially far-right Aryan ideologies and Nazism in Russia. Now, we're not talking like pop Nazism. We're not talking about like a 19-year-old in a Burzum t-shirt. Okay, we're talking Devi. We are talking Serrano. We are talking Blavatsky. We're talking true Aryanism ideologies, okay? Now, if you want more on that stuff, you can go over to the Patreon, because this is YouTube, and I'm not trying to get in a little bit of trouble, because I think I'll here on YouTube's, I'll get in a little bit of trouble. So that's over on the Patreon. Otherwise, I'm going to end up orbed. And as I always state, these videos are trailers for the full videos on Patreon. YouTube is a place for my trailers for Patreon. Everything's on Patreon. This is just trailers. So if you want the meat of this video, which basically contains Russian Hyperborea, Aryan Russian demons, and a group called the Black Flame, you might want to go to the Patreon. It's pretty sick. Because as you'll notice, this goes from chapter 3 to chapter 5, and chapter 4, which is like a 40-minute breakdown of all of these things, is on the Patreon. You also get my politics special that I dropped like 5 days ago, and over 400 other videos. It's so good. It's literally, you get a free week trial. It's only $5. I dropped so much shit for you guys.
Chapter 4. The Black Flame, aka the right-hand path of Russia's esoteric right.
So here is the full breakdown of the Uhinsky Circle.
Chapter 4.5 St. Dugin.
So essentially what this led to was the
Chapter 5 Comparing Rasputin and Dugin.
So how does this make him similar to Rasputin? Well, I'm going to tell you.
Chapter 6 Why?
So now we need to get back to why we are talking about all of this. And this is because Alexander Dugin was the highlighted part of a conversation between Steve Bannon and Jeffrey Epstein. Bannon was asking Epstein if they could have dinner with Alexander Dugin. Bannon was Trump's chief strategist during his first term. And it really makes you wonder, like, what the fuck would these people be talking about after learning about all of the insane esoteric ideologies Dugin has? And it gets even more interesting when we see that Bannon was going to release a 5-part movie on Jeffrey Epstein, basically saying that he was Epstein's biographer at the time. But these emails show that they were a lot more than that, because at one point, Bannon says that Jeffrey is a pretty good assistant, and they then discuss if they're going to be having a trip to AD. Now, some people are saying that AD refers to Abu Dhabi, but maybe it refers to another meeting with Alexander Dugin. Now, is that me reaching? Probably, but I really do like the idea of Donald Trump sitting down with a Russian mystic discussing Hyperborea and how the Slavs are descendants from Hyperboreans who are descendants from Aryans, and how this is the way we are going to get back to escaping into the polar ice caps. I'm telling you, if you did not go to the Patreon for Chapter 4, you need to. So unfortunately, we will never know the true reason or the true nature behind why Bannon and Epstein were going to be meeting with Alexander Dugin for dinner with Trump, but we can only assume and only hope it has something to do with Nazis, Hyperborea, and maybe the returning to the Nordic roots of reality underneath the ice caps where the mammoths lie. These people are into some weird fucking shit. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will absolutely see you over on the Patreon. Peace.